Ain't No Half Stepping with Marcus J, live from the Den, Legacy Internet Radio. Appreciating everybody who is listening to us tonight. As you obviously know, we're concluding Black History Month right now on our final Black History Month show. But, of course, here on Ain't No Half Stepping with Marcus J and Legacy Internet Radio, every single month is Black History Month. So keep that in mind. There is no history without Black history. But to commemorate it, as we do here in the United States, of course, we put extra emphasis on it. So with tonight being the final Monday of the month, of course, we needed to make sure that we pay homage, special homage to those folks who gave us such rich history. One of the things that is not so great that's going on right now in our country is we seem to have this epidemic with school shootings. And it seems to be happening quite frequently. When we had the most recent one in Parkland, Florida, back on Valentine's Day, February 14th, I believe that was the 18th one in 45 days of 2018. Now, most of those did not result in casualties, which is a good thing. But I think that number basically was compiled based on the fact that folks brought guns to school. And those guns, of course, ended up being fired. So that's how they came up with that number. That is, of course, what my understanding is. So as we've gone through various stages of conversations here on this show, as well as others here on Legacy Internet Radio, we have been having these conversations, and one of the main people who have been affected by all these things have not been present in these conversations. We've got the President of the United States and some of his supporters that are looking to arm teachers, send teachers to schools with weapons. And many of us have had their opinions on that. Many of us have spoken on that on the air as well as in social media. Of course, I have been very vocal about that. But I felt that it would be very appropriate to go right to someone who would know, because they are there. Oftentimes in America, we make decisions for people without asking the people most affected how they feel about those decisions. We're not going to do that here on Ain't No Half Step with Marcus J. So without any further ado, I would like to bring to the show an old friend of mine. This brother and I go back almost 30 years as high school friends. Lost contact for a few years, but reconnected. He is a teacher in the Trenton area in New Jersey. One of my oldest and dearest friends, my brother, my partner, and my friend, Mr. Viktor Lawson, is with us here on the live line. What it do, homie?
Hey, what's going on, Marcus? How's everything?
Man, I'm doing well. How you doing?
I'm doing good. No complaints over here. Just living life day to day. Still happy to be around. I definitely appreciate you having me on. And I definitely support everything that you're doing, because you've always been about that, making sure that everything was for us, by us. So I definitely appreciate you bringing me on. And if I could support in any way, lend an opinion, I'm glad to do so.
Right. Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate you saying that, and I appreciate, when I reached out to you, you responded very quickly in an affirmative way, saying that you would be happy to rap to us. And so I wanted you on for a couple of very, very specific reasons.
Okay.
One, my observation of some of the things that I've seen you do and observed. You're an outstanding teacher. So
thank you.
First, congratulations on that. The second reason is, I guess some would say, is a little bit shallow, but I don't think it is, because if you know me, you'll understand why. But you're a black man. You're a black man. You're a black man that's a teacher. And, when we were kind of rapping before we went live, I said, you kind of like a unicorn, bro. There's not a lot. So I want to get to, your history as a teacher and all of that stuff here in a minute, your opinions about some other things. But the first question I'm going to ask you is, do you see a lot of other black men as teachers? Because I made the joke that y'all like unicorns, but I'm not there. I'm not in the school, so I don't know. Is there a lot of black male teachers, or are you guys legitimately a minority?
Oh, we're definitely a minority. I mean, it's one of those things where the teaching profession, where you see a lot of educators, and you see a lot of males in education, you don't see a lot of males in the classroom. And for me, that's always been an issue because, of course, with anyone in any profession they do, everybody, you know, you want to support your family. So you look for ways to make more money. And everybody thinks the way that you make that big difference to make more money and also impact education is to become an administrator. And I always felt the opposite. So I know I told you before, I'm not the teacher with the politics. And the politics is I don't want to go into specifically a leadership role where my role will become diminished, where I become, as you say, I'm a unicorn. Well, I don't want to become invisible to the individuals who need me the most, and that's the students. So I don't see a lot of males in the classroom, and I don't see a lot of males, especially in urban areas, in the classroom. Now, there may be others who disagree and say, well, there are male teachers in middle school, in high school, but I teach third grade. And in my 18 years of teaching, I've concentrated on first and third grade. And one of the reasons why is because it's this myth that men cannot nature and men cannot nurture. And when I heard that, I said, well, wait a minute, what do you mean a man can't nurture, a man can't nature? And I said, that's totally false. I said, we have to build, or rather, we have to change the narrative for children early on because we know the dynamics with a lot of our children not having two-parent households. When you don't have a two-parent household, girls don't know how to treat men as they grow older because you don't know how to build those type of relationships. Boys don't look at men the way they need to, or as somebody who's established. They look at men more from an authoritative perspective where you see police officers, social workers, people are always telling them what to do, versus somebody who genuinely cares about what they do and care about their future to do things that encompasses the whole education. And then, so I didn't want to leave that role. So in 18 years, I've been a primary school educator. Now, I've gone on to get a master's degree as a reading instructor, which would certify me to become a reading specialist. I'm in school right now, working on another degree. But I don't want to leave the classroom. The only way I would leave the classroom is if I become a literacy or a math leader in that perspective, because then I'm still in and I'm in a leadership role, but it doesn't take me away from impacting the individuals that I joined this profession to impact, and that's the students, the kids. And I know, and you would know, growing up, I'm from Newark, you're from Jersey City, and we met, at a neutral place, but how many African-American teachers did we see early on in our life?
Not a lot. Let me say, and certainly not male.
Exactly, not males. The benefit that you and I both had is that we had strong male figures around us. We had parents, but a lot of our kids are missing that, and I wanted to give back in a way that I'm going to teach you how to read. I'm going to teach you how to do math. I'm going to teach you that education is important, but I'm also going to show you what a strong man looks like and show you that relationships can be built with men. And teach these boys how to stand as men. Teach these girls how to appreciate a man. So that's why, I stay at the level that I do. And it's not because I feel like I can't lead a school or I can't lead this. I feel like I could be very good as a leader. It's been said to me before. But I believe that my children, they're my future. I want to teach them to lead because they're going to be my leaders one day. And I want to prep them.
I mean, just to hear you speak the way you're speaking right now is inspiring because, it would be understandable when you started off by talking about how folks often are looking to make the most money that they can make in whatever profession or skill set they actually have. And, I guess as a teacher, the logical progression for you would be, I guess, to move up into administration or move on, I should say, into administration. So I find it absolutely outstanding and noble that you would want to stay there in the classroom, which moves me, I guess, to my next question. So you mentioned a couple of times that you've been teaching for 18 years. For 18 years as a teacher, let's talk about how you ended there. Was that something that you went to college for? You can shout out your university now. This would be the time to do that. But
of course.
Yeah, HBCU, of course, right?
HBCUs all day. I love every HBCU. Delaware State University, class of 1997. I'm a Hornet. You know, shout out to my Hornets and my Hornets that's in the Virginia area. Actually, it's funny, you know, like I said, you know, we've known each other for a long time, and it didn't start off that education was the ideal path for me, but it was something. I was an English major. I always liked to write. You know, I didn't want to read as much, but I liked to write. And as I was going through school, I realized that, you know, I need to have something else there, because English alone, I didn't know what I was going to do with that. So I picked education as a minor. Okay. And I said, you know, this way I could combine the two. And I actually wanted to be a rapper. You know, wow. It's funny, but like,
I think we all did back then, man. We all did.
Right. You know, so it's funny. And I actually, when I landed my first job right out of college, the very next day I had a job interview at a group home in Delaware. And I took this job at a group home where I was working with autistic and mentally retarded adults. You know, I hate to say mentally retarded, so I say OMRDD. Adults. And some things happened. I went back home to Jersey, took another job in the same field up in the Bronx, New York. And I said to myself, you know, every day I'm working with individuals who pretty much can never do anything for themselves in life on their own. They'll always need assistance. And I look at what's going on back home in Newark, and I look in Camden, Trenton, Patterson, Jersey City, our urban areas in New Jersey, and how, you know, we have kids who are very able to do so many things, but they don't believe in themselves.
Right.
And I said, you know, I need to go back and I need to touch, you know, my community or a community that's like the one that I know, and help these kids realize that, you know, they can be successful. They have every opportunity. So that's how I transitioned from just coming out of college and working a job to finding a career that I loved. Right. You know, because I was young. I was 22 coming up out of college. I was still young, you know, and I really was, I got to work, I got to do this and that. But education was always there, and I realized I'm not going to be a rapper, no matter how hard I tried. And I didn't think I was horrible. I just didn't want to. I didn't have the commitment necessary to be a rapper because, one, I knew I didn't have the money to do it. You know, it took a lot of money. I didn't have the money to sit there and support that, but, you know, it didn't mean I was going to stop supporting the music. It doesn't mean that I don't love it. But I had to find something that I could love. And when I started teaching, I just saw the impact, and I looked in the student's face, you know, to see a male. Because I wasn't met with open arms right away. I was really met with shock, like, huh? Yeah, a male teacher in first grade. Like that, you know, it was a shock for a lot of people. It was a shock for a lot of parents because there's a lot of stereotypes. Yeah, there's a lot of stereotypes that come along with being a male in education, especially when you have kids in first grade and, you know, the dynamics of what goes on in their home and what some of these kids are introduced to. You know, like I said before, you have lack of fathers there. You know, you have kids who have probably been molested at an early age, so the way mothers would look at men to have to be with their kids all day, boys and girls. You know, and then my colleagues, you have to separate the two also, because you get colleagues who look at you, oh, yeah, he's a man, he can't do this. What does he know about teaching other kids? But then it's also the other part to the relation, the dynamic of men and women when you go at that level, because a lot of people think, oh, he's a man here, he wants the women. Right. You know, and that's why I said it's those dynamics that people don't understand that come along with the territory. Right. But you have to stay focused on what you're there for. And I will say that those are battles that I've had to fight in my career, both from opposition of being a male in the classroom, but then also people looking at me the wrong way as if I'm there because I'm trying to be Don Juan in the education system.
You know, it's funny, as I'm listening to you, you know, say these things. I guess as a layperson who just doesn't have any concept of what it's like for you educators, my natural instinct would be that folks would be happy to have male teachers who are, 1, about it, 2, motivated, and 3, good. And here you have you there, you know, and you want to do elementary. Like, I don't think I had a male teacher until I was in the 8th grade. I remember, you know, my first male teacher, Mr. Atkins, in the 8th grade. And the irony is he was such a good teacher that I never forgot him. And during the age of Facebook, he and I have reconnected. I'll tell you a real quick story of a lesson. that I carry with me since 1988 in the 8th grade, 30 years. I was the manager of the basketball team.
Okay.
Basically, I carried the clipboard and I got to hang out. That's basically what the managers of the team did. And I had a project that I was supposed to do for Mr. Atkins, and I hadn't done it. And, you know, when you hadn't done something, you should expect there to be consequences. I wasn't really concerned about those consequences. So we're getting ready to go to a game. Mr. Atkins says, do you have the project? And I said, nah, but I'm going to a game. I'll try to get it done later. And Mr. Atkins looked me square in the eye, and I never forgot it. He said, your position as the basketball manager is now defunct. That's exactly what he said to me. I never forgot it, because at the time, I didn't know what defunct meant. I didn't know what it meant. But the lesson that I learned was that you don't get to skirt responsibility because you got something else that you want to do. If you have a responsibility, you have something that you're supposed to do, you have to do that before you get to do this. And this was something that I learned from him, and I never, ever forgot it. And I always looked up to him for years and years and years after that. He ended up, you know, falling into the line of favorite teachers. You know, when you would have those conversations, you get older. You remember your favorite teacher? Mr. Atkins, my favorite teacher. Why? Kind of because he put me in my place. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And he was strong-willed about it. And I'd be willing to bet that one of your kids at one point is going to be telling a similar story about Mr. Lawson. So I look forward to hearing you tell me that story one day about a kid that came to you 10 years after you had him, and they spoke fondly of you.
You know, and it's funny, I want to touch on that. I would say that I wouldn't be where I was as a teacher if it wasn't for the constructive criticism that I received from the professors I had in college. And like I said, you know, I went to an HBCU. Of course, you know, I partied. You know, I did things, you know, I went to class, you know, in situations where maybe I shouldn't have gone to class. But they would pull me to the side and say, you know, you're too intelligent for this. You're wasting your years away, and that's all I'm going to say to you. And being 19, 20, you feeling like, oh, you know, get out my face. But when I think about it now, I realize that what they said to me meant so much because they didn't have to say no more.
Right.
They made me look at myself. And most of my kids, and I'm going to be honest with you, in 18 years of teaching, most of my students, you know, I'm the funniest teacher to some of them. To some of them, I'm the meanest teacher. But it's while they have me. But when they leave me, come September, when it rolls around, they see me again, it's Mr. Lawson. Hey, Mr. Lawson. So I like the fact that my students don't want to tolerate me for 10 months. But when they leave me, they appreciate because they know that I've had their best interests at heart. And it's one of the things with the dynamic with my colleagues because my job is to prepare them for the next grade. Right. So when they go to the next grade, my student might not make honor roll at all with me. But when they get to that next grade and they see that there's an improvement in their grades and they're showing that they understand the academics, so they tell that teacher, Mr. Lawson taught me that. That means more to me than anything because even though you didn't listen while you were with me, it stuck in there and you knew that I was correct in what I was trying to tell you. So, you know, that's an accolade enough for me is that my students, they have lifelong lessons to carry with them that they got from me. And that means so much more to me than just, you know, somebody sitting up there. You know, you see the instant rewards. No, the instant reward for me is later on in life. How do you manage in life? How do you get along? What did you learn about yourself after leaving me? Because I learned a lot from myself through my students. And that's the biggest impact that it's had on my career. And that's why I still don't want to leave that classroom.
Right. And you know, Half Stepping with Marcus J, live from the Den, Legacy Internet Radio. We're talking to an old friend of mine, Viktor Lawson. He's teacher in the Trenton, New Jersey area, elementary age children. Quick question before I move on to something bigger, Vic. Have you ever taught, what is the highest grade that you've taught in your 18 years?
The highest grade, my first job was middle school, special ed. Okay. Middle school, 7th and 8th grade special ed.
7th and 8th grade. Okay, cool. So that kind of works with, I guess, the next piece of the conversation, and we kind of sufficiently set up, who you are, what you've done, how long you've done it, why you're doing it. I want to kind of get to a little bit of the uncomfortable piece and kind of largely why I wanted you on the show tonight. There's been a rash of shootings in school, and I think most of us remember in April of 1999, I guess the first one that really kind of captured the attention of many of us here in the United States, which was the school shooting in Columbine, where Klebold and Harris basically shot up the school. And then if you look, fast forward, to 2 weeks ago in Parkland, Florida, you're looking at, almost 19 years in between where we have kind of been dealing with this as a country. And I think many of us remember watching President Bill Clinton at the time go on TV and offer his condolences and thoughts and prayers. And then when it continued, we remember seeing President George W. Bush go on TV and give his condolences and his thoughts and prayers. And then, of course, one of the most devastating school shootings that any of us, well, they're all devastating, but when it happened in Sandy Hook with those 5-year-olds, almost 35-year-olds, and to see President Barack Obama, when he spoke of it later, he could barely contain himself. It's the first time I think many of us ever saw a president near tears while he gave his condolences and his thoughts and his prayers. And, of course, President Donald Trump recently doing the same. You're a black man in the school as a teacher. And I think as this is continuing to happen, we can all say, nah, it wouldn't happen here. Nah, it wouldn't happen here. But I think we have to be honest and mindful of the fact that it could. It may not. We hope it won't, but it could. So there's multiple levels to how I want this piece to kind of go, and I want you to help me drive it. So you can kind of take it in any direction that you feel as though it should go. But I guess my first question is this something that you guys as teachers and administrators prepare for? When we were younger, we were getting fire drills. They would pull us out the classroom, and I think we all were excited to get a fire drill because we got to chill for a little while. We got to go outside. We get to laugh and joke with the homies. But do you guys do any kind of preparation for the prospect of something like this happening? And if not in elementary, do they do it, as far as you know of, in the Trenton area school system?
Well, to answer that, since all of this has happened, there's been, other than fire drills, you have lockdown drills, where they have two different type of drills that they do. One is a lockdown drill where if there's an active shooter on the premises, you turn off all the lights in your classroom. The students go into an isolated corner where you cannot be seen through the doorways or through the windows. You turn off all the lights so the room is completely dark. So if anyone is in the building, they don't see any persons where they could inflict harm to. It's very funny, and I don't say that as make light of the situation, because it's very terrifying, to say the least. But you look at, I want to go back to just like where we grew up at and how you started to see in the inner city they wanted to put metal detectors in the schools. Okay?
Right. I'm glad you brought that up because that was part of where I was going. So go ahead. We
know that in our communities, gun violence is rampant, And one thing we have had a lot of in our schools, always had a lot of fights in our schools. There's been some incidents where it might be melees, you might see knives. But to my knowledge, growing up in Newark, I never remember a shooter going into the school or anyone ever having a gun inside the school where they actually used it to inflict harm on anyone. And I'm saying that because I'm looking at what's going on, and we're made out to be savages in our own community. However, never once, even the roughest, toughest kids never brought guns into the school because school was still considered a sacred place. You just didn't do it. they might have stashed guns outside of the school, and there might have been school shootings that happened on outside of the school, but never inside the school. And now when I see this happening, I'm wondering, when do we change this narrative now? Why are you making urban kids hostages by putting metal detectors in their school and treating us as if we're the ones who are acting as savages, when we're not the ones who have our hands on assault rifles at freedom? You know, everything we're getting mostly illegally.
Right.
You know, and we're not stashing them in schools to do anything on the school premises. So the lockdowns are all well and good, but we really have to look at what's going on, and we have to treat this as a whole situation where it's not just I know I'm rambling with it, but we're not looking at that gun violence, period, is a problem, and how it's used is an even bigger problem, because it's children in rural areas, in suburban areas, that are actually inflicting gun violence on their schools.
Right.
And, you know, so I look at stuff like zero tolerance policies. Those things, to me, when I read that type of information, it was put in place because of the fights that they said that we would go through. But nothing's being done to enforce what's going on in rural and suburban areas when these shootings are taking place.
Right.
I just think that, you know, we have been pushed into this, what they see going on in our communities, as if we're the ones that's doing these things, and it's not us. And I don't want to make it seem like a racial issue, but it's not our children that's doing this.
Right. Well, I'm glad you actually made that. I'm glad you brought that up. You know, and you may not want to make it a racial issue, and I understand, and I certainly respect that. One of the things that I've been pretty vocal about in social media, and some of the folks who I blog with regularly, kind of alluded to where you were going just now. Quite frankly, we don't do that. Our kids don't shoot up the schools. Like we just don't do that. And it's odd because, you know, the administrators and the decision makers and the people who decide who's going to get a metal detector in their schools are basically doing it off of the premise that the inner city kids are the ones that are perpetuating violence. The thing about that is, you may get into a fight in the hood. You might have some sort of neighborhood beef, because I guess that's what we had when we were coming up. That's what it would have been. You know, a lot of the fights and stuff will come from how there's neighborhood beef. You come from Weequahic, I come from West Side. We got beef with each other. You know what I'm saying? And those are Newark references for those national people. So yeah, let's get a medical detector because we don't want them up in here in Weequahic High School shooting it up. The thing is, though, culturally, and tell me if you disagree with this, culturally, the mentality of a young black child, male or female, is not, I'm real mad, I'm going to take this gun, and I'm going to take as many people out as I can get. No. The mentality of black youth is, I'm mad at you, so I'm going to take you out. Would you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from with that. And I'm gonna touch on something real quick as you said that. It makes me think about how, when you ask me about like what lockdown drills we have, this is when you look at the school system and you look at the laws and zero tolerance policy. Okay, and they said, oh, there were warning signs with the young man in Florida who did what he did just recently. There were warning signs.
Right.
Now, please tell me how. When I teach third grade. If a third grader says, I'm going to shoot you, okay, and this has been said before, I'm not doing my due diligence now if I don't write that student up and send a referral right down to the guidance counselor until it goes to the principal, and then there has to be this conference with his parent. You understand what I'm saying? If I don't do that right away, I'm going to get a red flag against me because I didn't report it right away. Right. But here it is. You have red flags all down the line that comes out after the fact.
Yep.
and he's already inflicted damage.
Yep.
And people who know this, people who knew that this could happen, teachers, adults, his peers, who did not say anything. Now we're in this crisis where the tears are overflowing. The grief is tremendous. But there's all these excuses around that narrative or all these things people knew, but no one said nothing. But on this end now, when you talk about urban kids, if it's not reported right away, then I didn't do my due diligence. So if you're telling me, and like I said, I don't like to turn everything into a racial narrative, but if you're telling me that you're not sitting up here trying to already perceive our kids one way, you're wrong. You know, it's just wrong. It's wrong. That's the only way I have to look at it, because there are judgments that are passed on our kids that we have to do certain things.
Right.
You know, I see people overreact right away. And I don't like to say overreact because it's your job. I have to report it, okay. But as soon as the child says something, it's like, oh, he said this, let's go do this. But in this case here, because of where it's located, no one said anything?
Right.
Something is wrong. And as you say that, I laugh because, when I read your page and I know how fond you are of Malcolm X.
Yes.
And one thought that's run through my head now so much is, you remember the comment Malcolm X made when Kennedy was assassinated?
The chickens coming home to roost.
The chickens come home to roost.
Yeah.
Now, and I know people say, oh, my goodness, like you're not, that phrase has been so taboo to a lot of people. But that's what it's like. Now we have this problem. Now it's a problem. It's a problem now. Everybody wants to jump up and say, oh, we have to do this, we have to do that, we have to do this, we have to do that. But in the meantime, you sat here and passed so much judgment on our children that you still continue to push our children to the side.
Right.
And you don't look at it. It's not our kids.
Well, it's a problem because it's their children. It's the suburbs. It reminds me of how right now the opioid thing is such a big deal, and how these people have to get treatment, whereas when it was our kids dealing crack, they had to go to jail. And one of the questions I want to ask you, Vic, we'll come back to the school shooting thing here in a minute, but this piece of the conversation is leading me to something else. There are rumors or thought processes or conspiracy theories that suggest that the school-to-prison pipeline is determined largely by some of the tests that the children are taking in school. For example, you teach third grade, so that's typically 8 or 9 years old. So 10 years from then, they're going to be officially adult, 18, 19 years old. And a lot of the tests, the standardized tests that they're taking at the age that you may have them, could potentially determine what their career path is going to be. For example, if you do average, then you're going to grow up to be kind of an average person. For example, if you do average, you're going to be the worker bee. You're going to go to work every day. You're going to be the middle class. You ain't going to bother nobody for the most part, and you're going to mind your business and just go to work for 50 years and get your watch at the end if you don't die first. Then you got the kids that excel. They may be good athletes, or they may be some sort of scholastically inclined where they're going to be your doctors and your lawyers and, your architects and basically your upper level people. Then you have the kids who do not test very well, who potentially are the cream of the crop for these people who are owning private prisons. And you're looking at these test scores, and you're saying, all right, you got such and such percentage of these children who are doing so poorly in these tests that they will have no alternative but to be criminals 10 to 15 to 20 years later. This is how we know how many of these prisons we need to have and how many beds that we can have. And because they're private, they can mandate how full they need to be. That's something that my interpretation of a lot of this stuff has led me to kind of lay it out the way I just laid it out. To all of that, you say, what as somebody who has those kids at that age?
I have so much to say on that, because the first thing I'm going to say is that, you know, and like I say, I know a lot of things that I've said. Somebody say, oh, my goodness, but you know what, forget it. I'm going to put it out there. The American school system is culturally disrespectful to our children. And I'm saying urban youth, Hispanic, African American, you know, those who are classified as other. Now, when you talk about the school to prison pipeline, it starts in 3rd grade. These tests in 3rd grade determines if they can if they don't pass this test now, they're already assuming, oh, this child will not pass an 8th grade proficiency test, let alone a 12th grade proficiency test, which means what? Like you say, oh, these are going to be our prison kids. We already know that they cannot handle it. Now, when I say being culturally irresponsible, when you look at the testing that's going forward, you know, I understand, oh, well, we're teaching them skills. But one thing about it is when you read a test or you read something, anything you read, you want to be interested in. You want to have interest in that. But these stories do not reflect our children on the test. So what happens, of course, a lot of them, they might not be test takers, even if they are test takers. It's boredom. Boredom can set in. They're not going to want to read it. So you continue to shove these tests down our children's throats, and these tests don't reflect anything that they relate to. And the first thing you know is that if you don't relate to something right away, you're disinterested. And I look at that, and that frustrates me, because that's something that I combat all the time, even, you know, within my own job, that I say, you know, you keep asking me to give a test to them, and I teach, you know, 33% of my class is Hispanic. The other 67%, I'm sorry, you know, African American. But when I give these tests, nothing, whether it's a fiction or nonfiction piece, relates to these children. So of course I'm sitting there like, you got to. In 5 minutes, I'm finished. I'm done. Well, why is that? Oh, it just wasn't interesting to me. It was boring. So now, when you take these test scores and you say, oh, they can't do this, they can't do that. So now they want to do what? They want to create competition. I don't say this to offend. I believe in education all around. I don't say this to offend charter schools at all, even though there's some problems that I've had because I've worked in a charter school and I've seen some of the stuff that goes on that's not right either. But then you say you want to create competition by what? Creating charter schools. Okay? But when you look at where these charter schools are being created at, they're being created in urban areas.
Right.
Okay? And when you look at the charter schools that are being created in urban areas, they're shutting down schools. Now, when you shut down schools, okay, you have this big vacated building that's not being torn down. But if you ever go inside of a school in an urban area, if you look at the walls, you look at the structure of it, it's like they're already measuring to say, oh, this room is this size. Right. Oh, you only need, what, this amount of space to have 2 inmates in a cell. So we don't need to tear this school down. As time goes on, when we get the right investors, we can turn these into detention facilities or some sort of treatment facility or some sort of prison facility or juvenile institution for these kids, because this is where they're going to be. But we're going to close them down and we're going to open up a charter school. So now we can weed out those kids who are able to do and who cannot do. And one thing I tell people, you know, and it's like conspiracy theories. Everybody say you got conspiracy theories, but I say if you look at it, you're from Jersey City. You know, Jersey City is doing very well with some of the charter schools that they opened up. And like I say, I'm not knocking, because I believe teachers need to work. That's my big thing with charter schools. I believe teachers need a job. The way teachers get laid off, I like to see teachers working, because I think there's a lot of great teachers who sometimes catch the short end of the stick. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. But when you look at it, what does Jersey City have? What does Elizabeth have? What does Newark have? What does Trenton have? They have ports. That's business. Water. They have water. So we get schools now that we could say are going to be great. We're going to put them in these areas because we need to increase the commerce. And like you said, private investment. Well, the more business you come, the more investors you're going to have who are going to do what? Or we're going to funnel money into this school. In the meantime, the people who are living there who are still struggling, whose kids are not able, you know, so now you weed them out. The kids who are not able to do, now they're lost. They're left out. You're plucking. So like they say, charter schools are for competition. But I'm telling you, you know, just from research, from knowledge, kids who are not able to do well, when they said their parents pull them out and take them to a charter school, you know what happens when they realize their child can't perform in the charter school?
What's that?
They put them back out to school.
They put them back in public.
They send them right back to their home schools.
Right.
And an even bigger part of that is the financial part because, as a taxpayer, taxes in this country fund the schools. So if you have a child who's sitting up here and it costs, this pupil is just say, for instance, it costs $21,000 a year for this particular student. Now, my cost could be off, but I'm just giving you an example. If you have $21,000 per pupil cost, 90% of that money goes to the charter school. But if that child returns, that money doesn't come back to the home school with that kid.
So it's gone.
So it's like it's turned into, it becomes a big, it's gone. It's just like that, it's gone. So now these kids don't receive the services they need. They're going back to the home school, and now you're weeding it out. You're talking about competition. You're not creating competition. There's no competition in that. You're already sitting. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No. Finish your point. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And, so like when you ask me the school to prison pipeline, I teach my children about the school to prison pipeline. I teach them about the importance. Don't worry about this test. Just do what you got to do. I'm going to teach you what you need to know. I'm going to teach you how to get I'm going to show you the different tricks because I don't want to see you fail. I don't want to see you this, but I explain to them, watch these videos with me on the school to prison pipeline because this is created for you. This is created for you. Do you want this for yourself? That's what I ask them every day. Do you want this for yourself? Because I don't want it for you.
I just love to hear you talk about it. That's why I'm just kind of sitting back and just listening because that's some real shit that you're talking. It's like you got a black man that loves you. You know what I'm saying? That loves you. And I say this all the time on this show and any other opportunity that I have to speak to people. I think one of the most powerful things that we have is the love, the open expression of love that comes from a black man. And the reason for that is it's something that unfortunately is uncommon because we are taught and we're reared to be so hard, to be so hard-headed. You know what I mean? Like you and I, not patting ourselves on the back, but we grew up in probably a couple of the worst neighborhoods in the state of New Jersey, in parts of Newark and parts of Jersey City. Maybe not our specific neighborhood, but certainly we grew up in pretty tough neighborhoods.
There was no getting around. We couldn't get around it. We had to walk through it every day. Regardless of what was in our doors at home, we walked through that.
Yep. Yes, every day. I mean, I know people that I came up with that's not here no more, and I don't mean as 43-year-old men. I mean as 15 and 16-year-old boys. My best friend from when I was 5 to 6 years old lost her life when she was 16 to the streets. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm listening to you talk about those things, and when I brought up the school to prison pipeline, I just gave you the theory as I understood it. But to hear you talk about how you teach that grade and how you've seen it, it just validated a lot for me. And it to hear the way you speak was great. But it makes me sad because it validated what I had already kind of thought, and to see that that's what's happening, particularly with our youth. And of course, we have to be mindful that youth is youth, and we have to protect everybody's child because a kid is a kid. But it's a little bit more personal when that little brown baby looks like you.
Let me. Yes, I want to add this to it because there are other facts. Like I don't believe every child is special ed. Being in third grade, I'm telling you, being in third grade, and I see it in first grade especially. I have people sit and say, "Oh, I'm going to refer this student because he's this and that." You take any 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old boy, he's not special ed. He's active. He's bored. He needs something to do. The reason why you're referring them for special ed is because you can't relate to him. And when I say you, I'm not talking about you. I'm not talking about me. I'm not talking about the African-American teachers that are in the building. I'm speaking about some of the teachers who are very culturally disrespectful to our children because they don't know our children. They don't know the community where they're teaching. If you look at the urban areas where we are, and I'm speaking specifically from the school that I am at, I am the only black male teacher in the classroom. The only black male teacher in the classroom in the school I'm at in Trenton, New Jersey. Now, if you can tell me that that's not a problem, and when I go to suburban areas and you meet your quota because based on affirmative action laws, equal opportunity acts, you call me in for an interview, but you know you're not going to give it to me. You just want to check off on your quota. Because when I go there to see the schools, and I go into a school and I go to see the teacher there's no representation of this one teacher, and they have a class that's probably, the school is probably 90% Caucasian, and most of their teachers look like them. But in my school, where the school is probably 80%, 85% African American, 10% Hispanic, and there's not as much representation of us in that building, something's wrong with that picture. Something's wrong with that picture. And something's wrong when you sit there and you don't think that there needs to be a male presence in there, and not a male person that's in there for being authority, but to be an educator.
Yeah. This is a discussion. This piece is a discussion that I've had. A good friend of mine. She's not very happy with me right now because I've grown to be too black for her. But she's a white female conservative, and strangely enough, we have always gotten along very well, and I still consider her a sister of mine, even though she's not very happy with me. Hopefully she's listening, and yes, I just called you out, sis. But we were talking about representation, and one of the things that I said that she wasn't very happy about, I had a post a while ago talking about how Jesus and Santa Claus are black. Both of them. Okay. If you understand the story of Saint Nick, Saint Nick was a black dude. And of course, the Bible kind of tells you what Jesus looks like. We just choose to look at Shaggy from Scooby-Doo and say that's Jesus. So we were talking about representation, and she was talking about how it shouldn't matter, it's Jesus, the story is what matters. And I said, you have the privilege, and I use that word, you have the privilege of making that point and feeling that way because you have representation that looks like you. And you mentioned my affinity for Malcolm X. One of the things that Malcolm X used to say, and I can't quote it, but I'll paraphrase it, is that he would say, when you pray, the slaveholders would pray to God, pray to Jesus. And the slaves would pray to God and pray to Jesus. But you the slave and you swinging. So which one you think God is listening to in that moment? You know what I mean? And I may be messing up the quote, but the point of it is representation. And so when you talk about those white schools where those teachers culturally understand the children and they look like them, and then you go to the urban area schools where it's mostly young black and Hispanic kids, but you still got mostly white teachers. It reminds me of, it's an episode of Good Times where Michael, who everybody knew how smart Michael was, the show was built partially in the first few seasons around how smart Michael was, but Michael failed the standardized test. Why? Because it was culturally biased. And I think you remember the episode that I'm referring to. It was culturally biased. And so when James in Florida went to the teacher administrator and gave him a black test, he couldn't pass it because it was culturally biased towards him. So I'm guessing, because you made a point of mentioning how, as the only black male teacher in the school, that's something that you got to fight on, that you got to fight about. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
Oh, I'm the angry black man, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with being an angry black man because, that's who I am. That's what I am. I'm a black man, and I have black daughters. And I hate to use color shades to describe who I am, because I should be able to say, okay, I'm an American. I was born here, but it is what it is. I'm an African American. I'm an angry black man. And I say that because, and I give you an example of something I saw last week. I saw the librarian saw a librarian teaching kids about the kid. My students were asking questions about slavery because she read some story to them. And she says, well, slavery is not the same in this country anymore. We've grown so much past that. And my face dropped because I said, you have every opportunity right now to engage this student and expand on what that student was asking you, because you could have taken that narrative into segregation. You could have talked about integration. You could have talked about prejudice and bigotry that still exists, because for us, when she said slavery is that's the root. But off that root, you have branches. You have branches. And people try to hide the fact that slavery didn't exist nowadays, but they don't realize out of slavery and saying, oh, well, slavery is over. No, you got these branches that extended, and they're growing even more, because being prejudiced is still here. Bigotry is still here. There's still forms of segregation. There's still a problem with integration. And my third grade students asked that question, and when I saw it, I didn't say anything. When we went back to the classroom, now, mind you, I said I had Hispanic kids. Now, at that moment, I had to be culturally responsible for my children, because, yes, it's Black History Month, and, yes, I do talk about slavery. But one thing my Hispanic students knew nothing about was the Middle Passage.
Right.
And when I brought up the Middle Passage, they were like, huh, Mr. Lawson? Huh, Mr. Lawson? I said, I will not treat you any differently because you are a part of the same struggle that your African-American peers went through. Your families also were part of that passage. And they were looking at me. And I've had people stop and just look in my classroom and say, Dad, he's teaching them that. Mr. Lawson, you taught them that? And I had some students who were split into my classroom, went back to class, and the teacher said, Mr. Lawson, you had my kids there. She has all ESL, English as a second language class. And they said, we learned so much from slavery, Mr. Lawson, because he talked about how there were slaves in Puerto Rico, and there were slaves in Brazil, and there were slaves here, because of the Caribbean and how they stopped there, and how, they were left off there and they had to do this and that. And I don't consider myself to be an expert on slavery, but I do have some knowledge to know that we are all part of that. African American, Hispanics, we are all together in this. And what would I be teaching if all I did was focus on teaching African American culture to my students because they dominate the classroom, but not mention that to my Hispanic students so they understand how we are one?
You know what's cool about that?
What's that?
You know what's cool about that? Where in that neutral area that you referenced, where you and I became brothers when we were teenagers, that was one of the things that we had the benefit of, because we were surrounded by the different aspects of our culture. There were a lot of Hispanics, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans. And it's funny because one of my Puerto Rican sisters, we were talking one day, having a very similar conversation, and I'm going on one of my many rants about, blacks and Black history and slavery and all of that kind of stuff. And she dropped a piece of trivia on me. She said, do you know where the largest concentration of misplaced Africans are in the world? And, of course, me, they came to the Caribbean and they ended up United States, me, fist in the head. She said, nah. She said, you know where it was? And she said, you can look this up. I said, where? Brazil.
South
America.
Brazil, yeah.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yep. And that's why I said, it's like, as you say that, like you didn't know, and that's the thing. That's the beauty about life, period. We don't know everything, And a lot of times, a lot of things that we have opinions on stuff. We have the knowledge we have the surface knowledge that we know, but we have to go a little bit deeper. And my students, from me saying that, I was getting presented questions that I did not have the answer to. And I told my students, we're going to write these questions down and we're going to put them up and we're going to, research is a big thing. We're going to research these together because I can't provide all the answers, but I'm glad because, see, that's what I'm doing. That's what I do as a teacher. My job is to sit there and facilitate an environment where my students are questioning more. And for me, that was more, right. That was so, it felt so, I felt like a success in that moment because Hispanic students were getting an understanding of something. The only thing they knew was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., if that, or Rosa Parks, if that. I showed them a film.
Same way.
Right. And see. Oh well, see that's the thing too. When you talk about the school and the curriculum, like our kids have become, how could I say, they're desensitized to their culture now, because you're stripping them of an identity. We watch You Must Learn video to start this month off. We watch it once a week. I'll throw on an X-Clan video in the classroom. You know, I'll throw on. You know, I will pull up footage on the Black Panther.
So you doing what they call you doing what we used to call when we was kids, dropping jewels.
I have to though.
You dropping jewels. Listen, here's what I want to do. I want to transition, because in the limited time that we have left, there is a big piece that I want to get your opinion on. When we started this part of the conversation, I asked you about preparation for school shooters and things of that sort. President of the United States made a suggestion recently about teachers, making the suggestion that we may want to consider arming teachers. Not all, but some. Basically, the prospect of a teacher who may be adept with firearms. So let's just lay out for an example. You have a teacher who is adept at firearms, who is now granted permission by whomever is in position of power to grant that position to carry their weapon either on the campus of the school or in the classroom. As someone who is there in the classroom every day for the last 18 years, would you support the prospect of yourself or any teacher on the campus carrying a weapon on this campus in the classroom?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. For several reasons. The first reason is because I just don't believe guns are necessary in the classroom. I really don't. You know, and I'm saying this because I've been in the urban area teaching for 18 years, and, you know, whereas though there's been violence, you know, we've had to stay inside on the lockdown, which was fine, because you need to have safety for the kids going home, okay? You know, kids have been shot going home, getting caught in crossfire for the dumb stuff that happens outside, but never once have there's been an incident where somebody's run up in the school with a gun. Not even my most, and I mean, I have parents that are Bloods, Crips, part of this gang and that gang, and I mean, they've never come in my room to the point where they've ever come into school brandishing weapons, no matter how irate they might have been at a teacher. And I'm going to say it for other reasons. One, I spoke briefly about how all kids don't like their teachers. Okay? Now, do you know that's an antagonizing situation, because now it's like, oh, the teacher got a gun? Okay. And we've seen videos where you've seen kids attack teachers. So imagine that kid sitting up there seeing that teacher with a gun. Okay?
Right.
And it's one of those kids who sits up there and says, oh, I'm going to do something just to make him pull it.
Yeah.
Now, it's twofold to this. It's twofold, because you got to look at the fact that you might get an overzealous teacher who sits up there and says, oh, I can pack arms, so if he acts out of line, I'm going to pull his gun out and let him know I can use it. But then you get a student who just wants to come in school and act a certain way and antagonize the teacher just to make him use it or make her use it. That's not going to be good for anyone. And I'm so opposed to it, because, you know, people don't look at the other things that go on. Look at postal shootings. What if you got a teacher in there who has arms, and they having a bad day at home, and they come to work and they know they got their gun, and they click for a minute, and they decide to open fire on their own teachers? Now, I know people sitting there saying, "Oh no, that won't." Why won't it happen? Why won't it happen?
I actually said the same thing, and you know, the people are saying, well, we got to do something. How about we ban ARs? If we got to do something, how about we do that?
Right.
You know,
and then you look at kids. Let's look at kids for a minute too. You know, all right, I'm a teacher and I'm in a classroom. I was saying this earlier, and just speaking. I was just talking to myself. I said, wow, I could be in a classroom and I got the gun on me. And the kids say, well, the teacher can bring guns. What happens now? I can bring a gun to school. Okay?
Right.
You know, these are just thoughts. Now, I'm thinking from a child's perspective now. Sometimes kids' lenses, you know, we never think about stuff through a kid's lens. And it could be 4 kids in your class who don't like you, and they know you got a gun. These 4 kids, they got their little guns, okay? So one of them is going to stand up to try to test you to get you to pull it. So if he gets you to pull it or does something to act out, now you got 3 other kids, his friends, who might have guns on them to pull it on you now. So now what? You done turn the classroom into the Wild Wild West?
Yeah.
And then what people forget about the obvious, look at what happened with the deputies who froze on the scene.
Exactly.
Just because a teacher can carry a firearm, let's be honest, and we've seen it. You and I have been somewhere where fights broke out, melees. We were there.
I remember.
Okay, so you know where I'm going with this.
I know exactly.
For a moment, what happened? You can freeze like a deer in headlight when, for lack of a better, when it hits the fan.
Yeah.
When it hits the fan. So if it hits the fan and something has to happen and you freeze like a deer in headlight, or you become nervous because, you might be used to going out there hunting, you know, but now you got other bodies in there. And you got to remember, you're going to put kids. How do you teach kids to act if the teacher pulls a gun in the classroom because another student is acting a certain way? Or there's kids, somebody in the school acts a certain way, but you tell them, okay, this is going on, but that teacher, he can pull a gun. Every kid is not going to act like, okay, this is what you do. A lockdown is different because it's a drill. You're talking about a live situation. Most live situations go bad because people panic. And you're talking about putting kids in harm's way. No matter how you look at it. What makes you think arming teachers with guns is going to prevent a scene like you had in Florida?
I don't know what they think, Vic. And the thing with that is, you know, there's so many reasons, most of which you just laid out, that this is a bad idea. But I'll add a couple of things to it. One, you know, who's going to pay for the guns? Oh, well, the teachers who already have a concealed carry license, they'll be the ones. Okay, there's your quick answer for that. But then here's my next one. If you look and study police officers, trained police officers, and what their success rate as far as when they fire their weapons, it's very low. And they're trained police officers whose job it is to be trained police officers. Imagine if you took that very low percentage that they have and then you apply it to people whose secondary job now is to be firing weapons in case something goes down. You know what I'm saying? Like, that doesn't even make sense. And how many incidences, like Fort Hood, for example, you had a whole army base of people who were killed by a crazy with a gun, and most of the people who were there had guns.
Yes.
People, you know, they were armed themselves. It makes no sense, and a lot of the people who are saying these things, and this is one of the biggest reasons why I wanted you on, because I didn't know what you were going to say. You know, I had an idea, but I didn't know what you were going to say. You could have shocked me and said, "Absolutely, give us all guns," but you didn't. But the thing is, nobody's asking teachers what they think.
No, of course not. Why would they do that?
Because you would think that it would make sense. You would think that it would make sense if they did, though.
You want me to come to school like, what was the movie with Michael Douglas, Falling Down? I'm having a bad day. I'm having a bad day. I went to Dunkin' Donuts to get my coffee, and I said light and sweet, and she only gave me 1 sugar. Now I got an attitude. You know what I'm saying? I got an attitude now. And the first person that says something wrong to me, I'm going to sit there and snap. Look, I got to say to people all the time, it's bad enough. It's bad enough for me being a black man in school. But, you know, now I got to be the angry black man with the gun. The angry black man with the gun. You know,
not only the angry black man with the gun, we know what our perception is of law enforcement with us and with weapons. Like Philando Castile had a concealed carry, and he told him he ended up dead. And, you know, on this show, often I go through the list of unarmed black men who end up being shot by police. But just imagine, you know, Mr. Lawson is concealed carrying at the school, the situation pops off, and Mr. Lawson has just secured the area, but the police who come in, they just know there's an active shooter, and they see this black man in the school with their gun. Come on, man.
Look. I'm when I go to work. I'm only nervous 2 times a day. Okay, and that's going to work and that's leaving work. I'm never nervous in my own community. I'm never nervous in a community that looks like mine.
Yep.
Because I feel comfortable. I feel comfortable with my people, even if they look at me wrong or if they're doing the wrong thing. I always feel like, you know what, if it's going to happen with them, it's going to happen. But I'm more afraid when I get in my car and I have to drive through the little suburban town to go get on the highway to come home, or when I'm leaving my street to get on the highway to go to work. And the reason why is because I'm an African American. Let me bob my head too fast in the car listening to Biggie. I'm getting pulled over. And then when I ask for what did I do wrong? Oh, well, you know, you were making the wrong movement in your car. Why? Because I'm listening to music? Because it's happened to me before. Okay?
Me too.
So I tell my students all the time, I feel I feel more safe in the school where I won't need a gun. You know, I don't need a gun in school. I'm more afraid that if you put the gun, even if you tell me that the person is trained, I'm more afraid of what would happen if my colleague had a bad day. I'm more afraid of that.
You have no idea how much you validating me right now, because I live in a town that is equal parts suburban and hood. And the job that I work, the full-time job that I work, you know, I never get into specifically what I do. I won't now. But let's just say I work in the field, and I'm in a lot of these areas. And I'll be honest with you, I have absolutely no problem going to the hood, none. And usually when I'm in, you know, Virginia is an open carry state and a concealed carry state. I have a concealed carry license, and let's just say I exercise my Second Amendment right. I leave it there. I don't never feel like I need it when I'm in the hood. Never. Right. Never. Right. Never. Right. And people trip off of me. They like, yo, you go to that neighborhood? Like, yeah, this is our people. I ain't going to be scared of your own people. But you know where I am nervous? I'm nervous when I see that Confederate flag. You know, I'm nervous when, you know, there ain't too many people around that look like me. And people don't like to hear me talk like that. But you just validated it because you and I didn't talk about this. That's something that you just said organically in this conversation. We didn't talk about that. And here you are, a black man from Newark, New Jersey, and I'm a black man from Jersey City, New Jersey, two of the roughest areas on the East Coast, and we both said that we feel more comfortable in the hood than we do anywhere else. Say word.
Of course. Look, I live in the suburbs now in southern New Jersey, and if I hear fireworks go off, I exercise my right as a taxpayer. I'm calling the cops. It's too late for them to go off. It's too late for them to go off. Nope, I don't want to hear that. I pay taxes too. I pay taxes too. And see, and I just want to touch on what you say about that, okay, about just going back to the gun thing, which hits me, is that, you know, taxes pay for the schools. You have to look at if a teacher can be armed and shoot a student. There's still something in this country called going to trial, having a court case. That's going to cost the taxpayers money. Okay, it's going to cost money. And if you want to allow arms in school, guess whose money is going to be affected? The taxpayer who pays for the school. It's going to go up. Do you want that? Because you're already complaining that the taxes are too high in your neighborhood anyway. See, there's so many other layers to this that you have to say there has to be better solutions to it. And arming teachers, to me, is not a solution, because as soon as you arm a teacher, the kids already know in school, well, you can't do this to me anyway. Excuse me. You can't do this to me anyway. Oh, if you do this, you're going to get fired. So I'm going to antagonize you to pull out your gun. I'm going to antagonize you to pull out your gun.
Already.
And then here's another little part to it that I laugh at, is because when it hits the fan and they say, well, what happened? The kids might yell up and say, oh, the teacher was wrong. And he acted too quick. There you go. So now what? Which means what? More lawsuits for the school district, more money that got to be paid. So all around the board, having guns in the classroom, everybody's going to get screwed with that. Everybody. I mean, it's no. It's a knee-jerk reaction where you're trying to apply a solution in a place where the solution
should come from outside of the place. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
The solution to the problem of school shootings is not inside the school. And if it was inside the school, if you want to say metal detectors, cool. I also propose, if you want to have a legitimate police force, a bunch of resource officers, then cool. Utilize the money that you would spend on putting Glocks in all the teachers' pockets and pay retired military or something like that. I personally cannot endorse putting guns in the hands of the teacher. Could you imagine Mr. Contreras, with a gun trying to protect us in algebra?
Right.
Nah. No.
I feel like, it'd be a bunch of teachers in the classroom like Elmer Fudd. Because you're going to have those who are going to be overzealous. You're going to have somebody you might have a teacher who doesn't like a student that much, and they're going to provoke that student to go ahead, do something. Yeah. So the narrative that's going to come about from this, it just does not support having it. It just does not support having it. But it all just goes back to, yes, it just all goes back to now that because it's hitting home for them the way that it is, because they're the ones that's on the media crying. And I mean, when I heard that comment, I was like, here we go. Like, I don't support all of the news arenas. I rarely watch the news except for the weather, really. And even then, you don't always get the truth with that. But, a lot of stuff that you see is like, I just always remember Ice Cube saying it in Boys in the Hood. When he said either they don't know.
How come I do it? Go ahead.
Right. They don't care, and when it's us, when they don't think about, when our schools are getting shut down in Chicago and the kids have to walk to the other side of town when it's bad and these kids are getting hit with violence. Yeah. Was your solution to go open the schools back up? No. So the kids don't have to go. Right.
They didn't care. They didn't care that there was no heat in the schools in Baltimore.
Right.
They didn't care.
Right. And the thing is, like, you're talking about mental health. What about our kids in Flint, Michigan, who can't drink the water or who are already suffering from lead poisoning? Yeah. That creates mental health issues, but you don't care to change that.
To deal with. You're going to have to deal with that in the next generation.
Right, but we got to get mental health counseling for these kids here. We don't get mental health options. We get jail. We get detention.
The crazy part about it is, the fact that you dropped the Ice Cube reference from Boys, I knew exactly where you were going. Either they don't know, they don't show, or they don't care about what's going on in the hood, and that's the real deal. And I think that's the essence of privilege. You have the privilege of not caring unless it comes to your door. And so when you have a lot of folks who don't look like us who get in their feelings when we use phrases like white supremacy and white privilege. It's not that we're taking a shot. At least not me. I'm not taking a shot. I'm analyzing the situation intellectually for what I see it is, because they're the default. They just are. Everything starts with the Caucasian American. Everything starts there. Everything starts there. If you look around, your teachers are white, your doctors are white, your judges are white, your law enforcement are white. Then you have a few of us sprinkled in. You know what I'm saying? And so, I mean, we mentioned it earlier about representation, but we could probably do that forever. Ain't no half stepping with Marcus J. Live from the Den, Legacy Internet Radio. Vic, it's been an absolute pleasure of mine, to spend this time, with you and kind of going through the various levels of education and how all of these things play into what's going on in the world today. You brought some outstanding insight, and I'm proud of you, brother, as a black man.
Thank you.
Who has had opportunities to go in other directions, but you chose to stay there and be the voice for our children, and that's something I think deserves a lot of applause and a lot of accolades. So I appreciate that you do that for our children, brother.
I thank you for recognizing me. I thank you for having me on the show. I mean, it's been a pleasure. It's just funny because I just feel like it's a conversation that I could have with you outside of this venue, just even on a regular phone conversation, because it's so much more that I could say about different stuff, but just getting it out and just being able to be free, open, and honest, and eliminate a whole bunch of, how could I say, teacher talk and academic language that everybody wants to hear, because I think that's what everybody, they feel like that's where your level of intelligence is, because you use a word that's 8 letters. Come on.
Right.
Let's be for real.
Right.
Let's really get down to the heart and the meat of it, because one thing we all have is a heart. Right. And sometimes we have to speak from what's in our heart versus saying the things that may sound politically correct to those who are listening, because in your household, every conversation is not politically correct. And that's what I felt, you having me on here, I just felt like, I was able to just naturally talk to you as if we were sitting right next to each other like 20 years, like we haven't seen each other in so long. We were right there with each other right now. But it's been a pleasure, and I would love to come back any other time to discuss anything, fatherhood, parenting, raising daughters, anything of that nature. I would love to just have an opportunity to speak with you again, your audience. It's just been a pleasure, so I thank you for having me.
Absolutely, and I may end up taking you up on that, so I might tap you on the shoulder. We'll talk about that and get an opportunity to have you back in the future, because you brought a whole lot to the listeners, you brought a whole lot to the show, and you brought a lot to me personally, so thank you.
Thank you.
Ain't No Half Stepping with Marcus J, live from the Den. Legacy Internet Radio. We're going to take a break. We come back, we got more of the show. You're listening to the flagship show of Legacy Internet Radio. It's called Ain't No Half Stepping with Marcus J. from my brother Viktor Lawson. He is a school teacher in the Trenton area of New Jersey. Thanking him for being a part of the show. We're going to take this break. Be back in a few minutes, y'all. Stay with us.